and they would be replicated for use in different countries, cities, other places. The applicable plans that we develop. And you'll see these as we go along. Note that we have millions of and thousands of organizations, people working on this. However, they're not collaborating and working together. So we're missing things, we're duplicating many efforts, and we're getting further behind in many areas. And I say here, for example, equality. Now, Eric Fromm points out when you make a change, you have to make simultaneous changes in all the associated spheres. So this means that we have to have a comprehensive, holistic strategy, standard action plans. And so this is what we've tried to do here. We'll go on down and take a look at the, just look briefly, please, at the Universal Strategic Plan to prepare target action plans for all the targets. And this plan basically shows where the money will come from. It shows that we need to develop what I call target action plan TAPs for all the 169 HCG targets. And this has a standard number system that we'll talk about when we look at the actual targets. So you can read this later on, but I'd like to go ahead and go to what we call Target Action 45, and this is the plan to rapidly end the use of nuclear weapons, which is the #1 priority. It ends wars, ends unemployment, poverty, and in particular it's aimed at speeding up and improving recovery of the Persian Gulf, of the Caribbean and the Gulf Coast of the United States. Now we need to do many of these things as rapidly as possible, and of course in the rest of the world. So we need to figure out a way to tie this all together. So I'm going to click on this tab 45, and now we'll see on this tab that the same thing we talked about, it's the plan. Now one thing about this is I try to stay away from using isms on this. The idea is do things in the most effective and efficient way possible. So we've got about 43 target action plans. There's about another probably 60 to go to get all the 169 targets. But what I want to do is show how this works. Down here we'll see tab 18 and paragraph 45.1. So if anyone had a suggestion for changing that, all you need to do is say 45.1 is that paragraph. 45 is the first two digits of the document, and point 1 is in this case is tab 18. So let's tap on this. I'm going to open this, and we'll see a couple of really important points. One of the big questions today is about these nuclear weapons. Now, I was the XO of the #2 officer on a fleet domestic submarine in 1972, and we could have wiped out over 100 cities. I would have done that because that's what I was getting paid for and working. But I see now how stupid it was. So anyway, and I didn't know about the Kellogg-Benn Pact of 1928. So here it's written up here. It's also written up under proof that all wars use the force, nuclear and other offensive weapons, and the doctrine of most assured destruction are all illegal, unlawful under international law. And what the Kellogg-Briand Treaty Pact says in paragraph 18.1.2, part 1 and 2, is we solemnly declare that the signatories condemn recourse to war for the the solution of international controversies. So the United States agreed to this and passed it. It became law for the United States in 1929. And the most important words are there at 18.1.2.2. Now, read along with me. Agree, the United States agrees, and the other countries of the world, that the settlement or solution of all disputes or conflicts of whatever nature or whatever origin they may be, which may arise among them, shall never be sought except by pacific, that means peaceful, means. So paragraph 18.1.3, what that means, if anyone were to fire a nuclear weapon at us, or any offensive weapon, the United States cannot legally, lawfully defend itself, because that would be unlawful. Plus, it would be really stupid to fire back a nuclear weapon, because that contamination is going to end up here too. So it also could mean you could get into exchange. Now, the other point I'd like to make is, if the President, 18.1.4, if he ordered anyone to fire a nuclear weapon or weapons, it would be an unlawful order, and it must be disobeyed. And this explains why. When you could have a chance, read a little bit more of this. So what I'd like to do is go on down here. Getting rid of the nuclear weapons and ending wars is really important. Now, here's the table of contents. And the way the numbering system works is, in every target action plan, 18.1 is the introduction, the first two digits of a document number, point 2 is the purpose, point 3 is objective, and the main thing is the actions. And these actions, you can click on each one of these, and it'll go to a little more of a write-up. Now, there's still a lot of work to be done on these, so we've got a pretty good outline. I would sincerely appreciate as many people as possible working on this. And the idea is this plan would be replicated so any country, hopefully the nuclear armed countries. So what we're saying here is negotiate. That's what we're required to do in the Keller-Ben Treaty with all the nuclear armed nations. That includes in particular Korea, to immediately end the use and disable all nuclear weapons. Now, I think anybody sensible would want to do that, and then take all of them off of alert, permanently disable them, and as soon as possible put them under the joint control of the U.S. and United Nations. We can click on any of these, you'll see a little more information. So once we get well, we should do this almost simultaneously. Since wars are against the law, they're unlawful, illegal, we should immediately order unilateral ceasefires in the United States, end all use of force, and settle by specific means. As you'll see, there's a plan here for each, and it's the same way with ISIS. We should not be bombing these cities. We should try to negotiate with ISIS, and specific means would be to file criminal complaints. Now, we'll talk about that later. And so here are some really important points. We would end all of combat operations. Now, there's a lot of other steps that go into this. Turn over most of the overseas bases and facilities property to the UN. The UN peacekeepers and Interpol, the international police, and affiliates, and they could use these offices to help implement the UN SDGs, and also have, and we'll talk about it in a minute, enforce laws worldwide, not be a national government. We'll talk about it. We're going to assign select armed forces personnel and government employees to the UN peacekeepers, international police. So they get some of the bases. Maybe they probably don't need them all, but we would also assign people to them so they can resolve the problems that, for example, going on in Myanmar. And again, there's a plan for strengthening the United Nations too. Another important point, it's obvious, should be obvious to everybody, that it's impossible to defend against the determined terrorists, and we're generating terrorists. We need to apologize. Well, one thing I didn't show in the introduction, the primary reason the World Trade Center and Pentagon were attacked was because we have troops in the Mideast. We had troops back then. We're supporting Israel over the Palestinians, and we're supporting Rames. We could go back up and look at that. It's right here. I would like to point this out, that the reasons the World Trade Center and Pentagon were attacked. Michael Shearer is a former CIA intelligence officer, and he says it was attacked because, not because of what some of our leaders have told us, that they attacked us because what we are and what we think. They attacked us because we have supporting Israel. We have presence of U.S. and Western troops. We were supporting the countries that oppose Muslims, oppress Muslims. We're putting pressure on them to keep their oil prices low. We support tyrannical governments. So we've got to apologize for all that. And there is a list of names that I'll show you in a minute of the countries that we have harmed. Well, let's click on one of these. Provide massive. Let's see. Provide massive relief efforts to people, refugees, displaced countries harmed by the U.S. Attachment A to this has that list of names. And we go back to that. And we need to provide the massive relief efforts. And we can tie these into the SDGs in particular, which we'll talk about in a minute, TAPs 1, 41, and 25. This has to be an integrated plan. Negotiate with and take action on the valid complaints of nations harmed. This, along with other actions, would essentially end acts of terrorism. And it would take, probably, if we really pay restitution, be sure everybody's fed, the people will help negotiate with ISIS and with the other people we've harmed. We won't talk about all these, or withdrawal of all the CIA operatives and U.S. Armed Defense contractors. There's basically a plan in here just about for everything. We got to end all direct or indirect military aid support, offensive arms and sales gifts to all countries, end all military alliance and membership, phase out NATO. We do not need a military or NATO if we're really going to have peace. And announce and describe the world of salient actions and issues of this plan. Congress needs to enact legislation. We've got to get Israel's occupation of the West Bank and attacks on a blockade of Gaza over with. And so there's everything we do. And in particular, engage, not coerce, North and South Korea. You click on this and you'll see a whole list of things we need to do. Not only denuclearize it, but we need to demilitarize it and bring all those troops back to the United States. So let's go through this. There's a whole list of things here. We'll go down to the bottom and we'll see there's a guy named Blum, Bill Blum, who's written 4 books about killing. This one's Killing Hope by William Blum, but it lists all the places the United States has interfered. We're interfering today in Venezuela, as most people know. But these countries we've have some horrible, horrible records in. Guatemala. And these, it's all written up very well in these books. And I'll get those online too. So what I'd like to do is go back to tab 45, the overall plan, and just go down through it quickly. This is 45.1 is tab 18 in the use of nuclear weapons. The next thing you do is permanently disarm, demilitarize, phase off the military and all offensive weapons, ships and aircraft, strengthen our state, not National Guards, and the Coast Guard. The National Guards came from what was the militia. And we need to convert much of the military industrial complex into co-ops that will provide and implement products for use for peaceful sales purposes, including in particular the items below. The third thing here, third important big plan is tab 20, which is to reform, strengthen, fully fund, and support the United Nations. Don't make it a world government, but give them the power, along with the World Court, ICC, and Interpol, and means to have a global law enforcement system. They can have satellite offices using our offices, and they could get people from all the armed forces, because we phase those out, to become the police force. And they would solve the problems that are going on in many countries of the world, like Myanmar. It would be, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Now, implementing these above tabs, in particular 18, 19, and 20, will provide a workforce of millions, probably 5 million disciplined, well-educated, and trained workers. Particularly, that's just in the United States. We've got engineers, they're all working on wars. We'll put them to work on doing two things. So you can see these different things we got that they can do. And then read this when you get a chance. And the main thing is tab 1, as rapidly as possible, put everyone in the world, including refugees, immigrant prisoners, to work at meaningful, decent work, and guaranteed living wages. And they do two primary things: eradicate all poverty and ensure everyone has all the needs and necessities for a decent life, a guaranteed basic living income, and the wherewithal to become self-sufficient until they are. The idea, if we keep stretching it out and paying them just enough money to get enough money together to keep them alive, it'll be way more expensive in lives and money than to go ahead and provide upfront surge funding and donations to get them self-sufficient as rapidly as possible. The second main thing they'd be doing is reducing the rate and degree of global warming and climate change in mitigating the adverse effects of those. And in particular, we would do this all over the world to at least get people fed, but we would speed up and improve recovery, rebuilding, hardening, and funding efforts in the Gulf, on the Gulf Coast and the Caribbean. Because of the way the hurricanes are happening, that's a very vulnerable place, so we have to fix that. Now, the next list of items are the actual targets and the target action plans that provide the needs and necessities for a decent life. And these are listed: providing nutritious and sufficient food. Now, as rapid as possible, we need to get people in each country raising their own food. And if probably there needs to be some trading between different countries that are close to each other. The next thing is safe drinking water. There's 1 billion people that don't have safe drinking water, so we need to provide that. And the United States and the other developed countries are obligated to help the developing countries, so they should provide the expertise and donate the required materials. And as rapidly as possible, the countries and the areas, different countries that are close to each other, should help each other out also. If somebody has a lot of extra drinking water, it could be piped to the other country. They need sustainable housing that will withstand the storms we're going to have. There's about 1 billion people that don't have adequate sanitation, sewage, and hygiene. And in particular, this needs to be provided for the women and girls and the others that are in vulnerable situations. And we do need to have a good rule. We'll talk about the rule of law in a minute. We need to ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, modern energy sources, and that we can do that. We'll talk about that in a minute. So all these things, education, affordable, accessible, sustainable transport. If you put everybody to work and you give them a guaranteed wage, then the people could work for this. And we'll talk about how we'll do that in a minute. Repair, modernize, strengthen infrastructure. Paragraph 45.4.3, tab 9. This explains how we'll be innovative. Using extensive donations of expertise, food, medical supplies, equipment, you would have the local people handle this, with people from the developed countries providing the expertise. Oh, and one of the important things that I didn't mention, we do need tap number 10, provide internet service for everyone in the world, in particular to deliver universal lifetime education and vocational training, so they can see how to do this. Now, some things that you're doing in your country, since we're going to have this basic same plan all over the world, will help the United States. The lessons you learn from doing this and the things you do. And the people of the country should decide what they need and what they want. And the one thing here that's important, we will use 9-digit zip codes in the United States that will show the location of individuals, communities, and co-ops, what is needed in a certain 9-digit zip code, and the organizations providing and delivering specific needs to that zip code. You'll have the addresses with it, but the addresses are tougher because there's probably 10,000 main streets in the world. So you need to have something the computer can use, and the idea is to have specific numbers of the areas. And the best thing I've found that works is zip codes. So this talks a little bit more about what you need to do. Ultimately end the need for fossil fuels. And this we have 32,000 people way underemployed in the United States. This doesn't mean they would all go to work farming. They would go to work on what they work on. Where you've got engineers that are in jobs, flipping hamburgers or something, you could get them back to their engineering roles. And people basically could decide what they want to work on. Now, if we work together and cooperate, we can do it with a lot less power and money by cooperating. Now, the next section shows the fund and donation sources to implement the SDG tabs and eliminate excessive wealth and income. 45.5 gives a rough estimate, which is about $1 trillion to rebuild and harden the U.S. coast, and all of the Caribbean. There's many islands there. Haiti are in tough shape. Many of them were in tough shape before this happened. Now it'll take about $1 trillion worth of donations and money. And the best estimate I come up with for the entire world to get implement these worldwide, it could be probably be about 700 trillion per month, depending on how fast the funds and donations can be provided and used wisely. Now, the faster you provide them, the faster people are going to get self-sufficient. And then, for example, in Puerto Rico, we absolutely would be better off installing solar panels, photovoltaic cells immediately in those areas where they have no grid to bring electricity. They'd have electricity in a week if you do that. It should be done by the people. It should not be privately owned. It should be owned by the people when you're finished with this, by communities, by the government, as long as they're representing the people and not the corporations. Now, that's a lot of money. $1 trillion and 700 billion per month would be about 10 trillion per year. So, but however, there's plenty of money, and there's some total numbers here. The ones I wanted to point out is in paragraph 45.5.3. Forbes produces a list of the 2,000 largest corporation companies in the world, and those 2,000 companies have 169 trillion in assets. They got this primarily by not paying people enough to buy the goods they produce. 169 trillion. Now, of the 2,000 in the world, 565 of them are in the U.S., and they have $40 trillion in assets. Now, of the 565 in the U.S., there are 25 large banks and finance institutions which have 19 trillion in assets. Where in the world did they get that money? The answer is the Federal Reserve gave it to them at very low rates, and they created it out of thin air. We'll talk about that too. Now, but the main thing to note is the financial industry in the United States has almost as many assets as all of the other large industries in the U.S. Defense, housing, food, cable, internet, movie industry, Hollywood, everybody in the U.S., the money people have it, and the money people aren't giving it out. And what causes recessions is when they can't make a profit, they stop investing because of the greed, and so we have recessions. We got to figure out a way to stop those. Now, 25 out of 565 have half the money. There's basically something amiss there. Now here is how we do it. Tab 31. Oh, and one of the SDGs is to provide net asset and income equality within and among countries. So that's tab 31 is to do that, and provide the funds and donations to rapidly implement the UN SDG TAPs in the U.S. and in developing countries, in deficit spending, pay down the national debt, in recessions and economic collapses forever. And it is stupid to have poverty or a baby going to bed hungry at night with all that money. Yeah. And the two big items, there's 30 items in tab 31, but the two big ones And one of them is, I use exactly the same words that our president used on reform taxation. He said he wanted a simple tax code that everybody can understand. He wants it to get money to the poor people. He wants to get improve the economy. So this will do it. What we do is eliminate the regressive sales tax and the estate tax. Eliminate the estate tax and all other taxes except for one. Oh, and the president wants to eliminate the estate tax, so we'll do that for him. A progressive property tax on all the net assets, and this includes natural resources and the land of all individuals, corporations, businesses, and other entities with more than $500,000 in net assets. Now that 500,000 is very arbitrary. It could be 200,000 or 100,000, or it could be a million. But there needs to be a number because 40% of the people are in debt in this country and they cannot afford to pay sales tax. When they go buy food for their kids, they use sales tax, and they turn around and get food stamps. And when they get the food stamps, they pay sales taxes on those too. Now, you also provide generous tax deductions based on worthiness of the charitable contribution of the taxpayer. If somebody donates arable land for the poor to grow vegetables on, he would get a hell of a tax break. You place limits on total income and net assets. If we let it go the way it is, every year fewer and fewer people own more and more of the money. It's exponential. The more they have, the more money they make. So if we keep this going, it'll go on forever. So what we need to do is determine how much money does somebody really need and how much should they be paid. And that's one reason for poverty. When you go to buy, the workers pay for all the food, all of 99% of it in the country. They get paid way less because the corporations take a big profit out of it, particularly the drug people. They take massive profits, massive salaries, so there's less money that people get, so they have poverty. So we've got to get rid of profits. Nobody needs a profit. Now, the main thing is when the poor people have the money they would have had to pay on taxes, they'll immediately start buying, and this will jumpstart the economy, decrease the wealth divide, and help provide the necessities of life to billions of people. And now it'll take some more, and let's go to the next slide. 500,000 as a proposed threshold is approximately should be carefully calculated. So maybe it'll probably be different for business. What about that will be very well work. Now, and that's net assets. If you have a house that's worth 500,000 and you got a mortgage for 400,000, your net assets are only 100,000. Now, the next step, one of the biggest causes of that 19.5 trillion is the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Now, the Constitution clearly says that Congress shall coin the money and appropriate all money. Now, what the 1913, some Congress senators and bankers had a secret meeting. It's on Hyde Island where they developed this Federal Reserve Act, and they got it passed apparently over Christmas. So, and it's unconstitutional because the Constitution doesn't allow anybody to print money except the Congress, and it was created by fraud, and it's also been used to commit fraud. And if you read my papers, you'll see what null and void means. Now, so we have to nationalize the Federal Reserve. Now, the banks have 19.5 trillion money, which basically was printed and generated by fractional banking. They contributed very little, if anything, directly to the economy. When the Depression came, they held on to the money. It caused the Depression. And when they reopened the banks after Roosevelt had closed them, they started loaning. They got money from the Federal Reserve. The banks did, and then they loaned it to the people. The people couldn't pay it back, so they got their houses. Same thing in 2007 and 8 when they had the housing boom. Millions of people lost their houses because the banks got the money. The money should have gone to the workers. Matter of fact, the Federal Reserve is supposed to have full employment, maximize employment. And now there's 32 million people, at least, way underemployed and unemployed. And so you have to take that money and start paying them. Now, but you convert those banks into a national bank, large private, and convert the large private banks into national banks. It's all written up here. And then what you do is Congress print and appropriate U.S. currency in exchange for the Federal Reserve notes at a rate based on how the Federal Reserve notes were earned and are planned to be used. The idea, if everybody that's earned money working have earned income, they would get at least dollar for dollar. The banks, they'd have to see what good they've done with that money to deserve it, if it's meaning what it means. Okay. So anyway, the paragraph that talks about who appropriates the money. Now I'll brief on this next one. The next section, and you're going to have to read the rest of this yourself. Now, what I like is you see what you're interested in working on. There's plenty of things to pick. There's SDGs to have a rule of law, which we absolutely must have. We have to ensure that all human rights and civil rules are respected. We need to end the massive incarcerations. I'll talk about it in a minute. The main way we need to get this squared away is we need to change our whole way of prosecutions. I was a judge for minor offenses in the Navy when I was right out of the academy. I was also a prosecutor all over the UCMJ. And this paragraph here describes what I learned. I served on the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Right here, from this work, I learned that getting to know about the accused, the guy apparently alleged to have committed a crime, counseling, encouraging, keeping him busy is much better than punishing, incarceration, and criticizing. It takes counseling, incarceration, keeping him busy at meaningful work. I've studied the works of Clarence Darrow, Alfred Adler, and the Beechers since then, and I'm convinced of this. Punishment, incarceration do not work, and our entire criminal justice system must be performed. So if you're interested in this, you can, any things you're interested in, please contact me. It's real simple, Fisher at PeopleNow.org, and let me know what you're interested in working on, what you want to help with. And I can explain a little bit more about any one of these things very quickly. Well, thank you for bearing with me. I've talked longer than I planned to, but and thanks again for visiting PeopleNow.org. Have a great day.